Hello, you guys. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Joel, you look great. I like the mustache. Is that a mustache?
Yeah, we're 2020 again.
Awesome.
So, thank you so much for sharing that amazing film with us. Very inspiring, very important message. For those of you who are watching online, we just watched Farhan's film. It's the story of the indigenous Gitanyao people and their struggle to protect their traditional land in the face of climate change, industrialization, and colonization in Canada. And we have Farhan Umidali and Joel Starland here with us for a Q&A. Farhan is the director of the film, and Joel is the wing chief for Wilp Willech, the second in command for the chief and a key player in making this Indigenous protected area happen. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's really special to be able to have a conversation with you and hopefully get some questions from people who have watched the film and would like to learn more from both of you.
Sure.
So my first question is, how did the idea for this film come about? How did you learn about this story, Farhan? How did you two connect and come up with the idea to share this story through the film?
So from my perspective, I had been working with the Gitanyao for some years. I had previously produced a short film for them for their Lahip Guardians program, which you saw in the documentary. They're helping the Lahip Guardians basically report to the chiefs, and they are restoring critical habitat in the territory, as well as monitoring the overall territory. And so I did a promotional video for them. And before that, I was involved with the Gitanyao because I was training them to use drones for environmental survey work. So I started off as a kind of a drone nerd that ended up convincing them to work with me in film, and then it expanded. And Joel was responsible for he's the one leading the effort on the Indigenous protected area. And as part of that campaign, they wanted to produce a film. And then I had spoken to Joel about that, and I was honored to be given the work. And thank you, Joel, for the opportunity.
Yeah, what I would add to that is we have the Hanatintina protected area, which is recognized underneath Gitanyao law, our Indigenous law, and as well as British Columbia and Canadian law. We needed to expand the protected area to this new resource area that the salmon were accessing, and it wouldn't be afforded the protection of British Columbian law. It would be just underneath Indigenous law to be protected. So we wanted to get the word out about why this area was special. We wanted to try to build a brand of why we're protecting the area in case there is ever a mine potentially developed, that there would be a lot of public support in supporting us in our efforts.
Fantastic. I think this kind of film is so important and impactful because a lot of people, like myself included, I did not know all of the history that we learned about through the film and what's happening there today. It's so important for people to know about it in order to actually be able to kind of hopefully help support and take collective action. And this film really, it's not only informative, but it's very moving, and it makes you really care about the place without being able to go there in person and see it ourselves, which I hope to be able to do one day. But you really gave us a really beautiful look at what the place is like and what the issues are, and made us feel something about it. So thank you for that. Does anyone have a question from the audience that they'd like to ask to these guys? Mark?
Yeah, hi, wonderful film, guys. I'm a Canadian myself, and sometimes forget about how much we've got out there. My question is, can you give us any updates on, there were several references to the claims being staked and the potential mining companies moving in. Any updates on that front from since the film was made, perhaps, or any measures that have been taken to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I'll take that with Farhan. Part of kind of a good segue from the first question on why we created the film. Once we created the film and launched the Indigenous Protected Area, British Columbia government took notice and was kind of embarrassed, I guess you could say, from their non-action and the reasons that they've provided. So leading up to the launch of the Indigenous Protected Area on August 28, 2021, British Columbia had actually approached us and said, we are interested in establishing this protected area underneath British Columbian law. We want to develop a terms of reference with you. We could potentially buy out these mineral tenure holders and create a stakeholder or no staking zone in this area. And at the end of the day, we informed British Columbia that they've come to the party too late. We've tried to negotiate with you for 4 years. We are going to go forward with this Indigenous protected area, and we are still interested in negotiating with BC on developing this underneath British Columbia law, but we're not going to postpone this protected area. So we have reached a terms of reference. We are under negotiations on bringing that underneath British Columbian law. There have been several companies, mineral stakeholders that have voluntarily agreed not to explore within the Indigenous protected area, which has been a great step forward. So there has been progress.
That's fantastic to hear. It's always amazing to hear that there actually, people take notice and actually start honoring what you've been talking about and listening to it. So that's great. And I'm glad you're continuing to go forward with your plan, but that there is a conversation happening. That's fantastic. Steve, you have a question?
Yes. And hello, Farhan. Another great film.
Hey.
And yeah, good to see you. I have two questions, if I may. First of all, is there anybody in the world or any partner that would recognize and support this declaration of their protected area, as an alliance, or is there anybody that just has already decided to, recognize that? That's one question. The second question is, did I understand correctly from the film that people are buying mineral rights, or investing online right now? Maybe you could expand on that. That was pretty fascinating, but it kind of went quickly for me. I didn't quite catch that part. Thanks.
That's for Joel, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been a movement within British Columbia in particular. Canada, we have about 40% of Canada is covered by treaties, and the remaining 60% are not. And about 95% of British Columbia, which is kind of a province of Canada, is not covered by treaty. So a majority of the Indigenous protected areas that have been sprouting up from ground roots activities like ours has been happening here in British Columbia. We have had several meetings with the other Indigenous groups, First Nations within BC, on how to form an alliance and kind of get a little bit more organized in that sense. There has been discussions with Canada on protecting that area underneath the laws that they have. So there's been a little bit of progress going on that front. Philanthropists, for sure. We've had a lot of different interests from different philanthropists. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which is a federal branch of government, has also been interested in working with us on bringing tools to the table to protect the salmon resource there, but their jurisdiction does not go as far as to have protected areas. So there's been some movement there. And yeah, online staking is live and well. You can sign into the database and purchase online mineral tenures, and you get rights to certain portions of our territory. And this was kind of the crux of the problem is British Columbia says we don't have to consult with the First Nations because when establishing these mineral tenures, because we're not impacting your rights. We'll only consult with you once there's a notice of work and proponents are actually going to be going onto the territory and drilling for holes. And lo and behold, the resource switched over and went outside the Indigenous protected area into this new area. And British Columbia does not want to protect the area because they would owe these mineral companies somewhere between $5 million to $16 million because they've incurred what's known as chattel rights. As soon as they purchase their mineral tenure rights, they are afforded these rights underneath British and British Canadian law.
Wow.
One of the main problems is the entirety of Canada and British Columbia as well. It was settled and colonized to access resources. And if Indigenous people are on their land, well, that can't happen the way they want. So that's exactly why this Mineral Tenure Act is the way it is. And they've actually streamlined it so it's easier for people to continue that mentality. It's actually it's much easier now to do it on a computer. They don't actually have to go on the land and do anything. So it's actually horrific to see that violation of human rights existing today in so-called Canada.
Wow. You know, hearing about the history in the film was already, you know, really painful just to hear the disrespect for Indigenous people, and there's such a long history of that all around the world, and Canada included, and we learned so much about that through the film. But we also, I found the most painful thing, the fact that it's still happening. Like, so much of this colonial behavior is still happening today, and it's happening in these ways that maybe aren't totally visible to the public. So thank you for enlightening us on that, letting us know it's happening still. What can people who are watching out there from different parts of the world online, what can we do to try to help push for this disrespect and exploitation to stop, and hopefully for more people to take notice of what's going on and push for a change, and push for real consultation being honored and not being just regarded as a formality? Is there something that we can do from afar to support what you guys are doing?
For me, the biggest thing that folks can do is to get educated and to begin to understand where do you live? What is the history of that place? What is the history of the peoples of that place? And right now I feel like here in my own country, Canada, that we are lost. And I would even argue that we are not a country right now, that we are a colony until we've been able to secure agreement between Indigenous people and the current state here. And right now, like I spend a lot of time in the forest, and once in a while you get lost. And it's a really scary feeling to be lost because you really have no idea which direction you need to go in order to get home. And that's where we are right now as Canada. And it really helps to know where you started your journey, where you are at, and where you need to go. And once you know those things, everything starts to fall in place and you get to move efficiently into that direction that you need to go. So I feel that's something common that all around the world that people need to start to do, and pass it on to your children and to the younger generation, and start to make changes there, because the old way hasn't been working on many fronts.
Steve, you have a question?
Yeah, no, this is really interesting. I remember a few years back, Farhan shared another film that we featured that opened our eyes about somewhat similar issue. Farhan, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the film now, but...
A Last Stand for Lilu, maybe. A Last Stand for Lilu, probably?
Yep, that was it.
Yeah.
Yep. And in that case, you know, it was oil exploration. And in that case, the Indigenous group basically, I mean, almost like took up arms and was patrolling and was exercising their you know, has anything, I don't know what happened there, but in Joel's case, I'm just wondering, have there been discussions about taking similar steps if people don't respect your declaration? Thanks.
Good question.
Yeah, well, Gitniao, we have had a history of being very creative in our approach of trying to create our own reconciliation and strategically put pressure on different points in order to advance our rights. And we have a very good relationship with a lot of different industrial proponents within our territory. We've built that repertoire. We've built a pretty good repertoire with British Columbia and Canada. And when things start to get bad, there are different ways that you can activate, like in the case of Lilu, there were things that we're doing like this film, public awareness, going out on the territory. And the other thing is legal action is kind of one of the last resorts next to actually physically going out on the territory. In the past, we've held what we call educational blockades. So we just set up on a highway in our territory and we stop traffic and hand out brochures telling people this is the issue here, this is what's going on. So those are some of the things, but we also stand a lot on science. We are firm believer in science and bringing together that with Indigenous knowledge and using that information to leverage different Canadian laws or British Columbia laws like the Environmental Assessment Act and those sorts of things. So there's a whole a lot of different approaches that we can take in case things that we do not want to see happen are proposed in our territory, in the Indigenous protected area.
I would say, like, right now, there's this very similar situation happening with the Wet'suwet'en as well, just your neighbors there, where they're trying to push through a coastal gas link, and it's become a very the police have come there with the backup, like they're in a militarized police. They're arresting journalists and they're brutalizing the people they're trying to force through pipelines. And so I was curious, maybe I could ask this question, Joel, like, what is your stance on that situation? Because that needs immediate action, I think. You know, those sort of situations kind of demand it, I think.
It's kind of funny you raise that. The Wet'suwet'en are our neighbors, and they've been having this fight since 2018 or so, but they've actually invited us to their territory to have a meeting in the next day or two. And for me, it's all around consent. If the Wet'suwet'en consented to, if this was, say, not a LNG pipeline and it was a solar panel field and the Indigenous people there still did not want that to happen, we would support that because it's the Indigenous right to see what they want to happen on their land. But yeah, we do stand with the Wet'suwet'en for sure.
Another quick question for me. You made a reference to education being a priority, and I'm, having watched the residential school issue blow up in Canada in the last year, I'm wondering if that has helped your cause in the sense that people are now coming to terms with what's been happening, and perhaps that's focused things on what's happening now and what could be happening in the future.
I would say from the public.
Sorry, just really quickly. Yeah. Steve's just asking me, what is the residential school system? You may want to just quickly outline that. I think it's sort of a given for Canadians because it's been in the news in such a big way, but for the rest of the world, perhaps people aren't aware of what we've discovered just in the last few years.
Sure. So residential schools was basically a way that Canada utilized this system to tear away Indigenous children from their families and try to turn them into everyday Canadians by utilizing the church to do that. And you saw in that film there, my uncle, he was the one, he went down to the river to go get some water. And by the time he came up, all his friends in Gitniao were all taken away. There was another story of this big chief in our community. He was in residential schools about 1,600 kilometers away from here. He was about 7 years old. Him and his little brother were called to the office, and they thought they were in trouble. And they went to the office, and their preacher and the nuns, they said, "Sorry, your mother has passed away." And they were devastated. And he asked, "Can we go back home to grieve with our mother, or grieve for our mother?" And that individual said, "No, you can't. You guys are like lost puppies. They don't want you. Nobody loves you. That's why you are here." And these are the sorts of things that were not uncommon. We have another chief that went to Edmonton residential school, and they were torn away from their families, stolen. And he was sent out to dig graves, and he actually, when he was digging, he hit a grave, and a bunch of dust sprayed up into the air and landed all over him. And he went running to the principal's office, told him what happened, and they forced him to go back out there to find another spot and to continue to dig for graves. And these people, these chiefs are about 60 years old, and this has happened for countless generations. And the whole purpose is like what Farhan talked about, is they needed to take us off of the land. Gitniao, we used to live all over the territory, and the government came in and established the reserves and told us that we had to stay within those so that they could go into the territories and extract. And this whole time, what we've always talked about is we want peace. All we want is to have a say at the table. We want a revenue share, and we want our laws to be upheld, which is a lot to do with sustainability. And that was all punched aside. But sorry, I forget, what was the first question before that?
The original question was with the residential school issue blowing up as big as it did.
Yeah.
Do you think that helped educate people and perhaps put more focus on your plight?
Yeah, I think so, because publicly, a lot of Canadians are becoming more aware of what has happened and why it has happened, and what the state of First Nations are and the reasons. But it was interesting. Looking at this, the federal election here in Canada, leading up to it, it was a big issue. But as soon as the election came along, that really fell off from the media coverage, the questions, and getting down into what can Canada do. And it was pretty disappointing to see, but I think it comes down to this next generation being aware of where Canada and First Nations have come from and where we are in our journey and where we need to go. And I got a lot of hope in our next generation to bring it more to the forefront and make real change and make justice. There needs to be justice on this land that we call Canada.
I would just add one thing about residential schools. I mean, when we were in the film, we call them colonial concentration camps, and this is exactly what they were. Children were forcibly stolen away from their families and basically brainwashed that their culture was wrong. They were suffered horrific abuse, sexual abuse, violence. It was a way to destroy the passing of knowledge from one generation to the other. And a lot of Indigenous communities, of course, like the Gitniao, they need to pass on their stories in an oral tradition for the culture and traditions to survive. So it was a tactical way to destroy future generations. And when you're colonizing a territory, you either eradicate the Indigenous population or you can assimilate the Indigenous population. And this was a way to assimilate and destroy. And of course, like normal schools are not built with graveyards beside them. So you can just see how they wanted to deal with Indigenous people. If they stepped out of line, these terrible things happened, or what, it was a free for all for abuse. And I can't imagine. Can you imagine? I'm just thinking like out loud here, how horrific that is to have mothers, like police officers, armed police officers, ripping children away from their mothers, and they're trying to hide children in their homes just so they can keep their culture alive, just so they can love their own children. It's just a horrible legacy, and that's all. I just wanted to clarify how horrible what that was actually.
Yeah, it's just an unthinkably heartbreaking history. And I think people are beginning to become more aware of that history, but a lot of people still don't know about it. And I think it's just critical for people to understand that history in order to understand, the context of what's happening today. And maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you guys have any resources where people who don't know about this story can maybe learn more about it, books or websites or places where people can learn more? I know this, the residential schools happened in the United States as well. It's a huge story that spans, a lot of time, and both the United States and Canada. And I think it would be great if people can learn more about it on their own and get informed, because it's just such an important part of those countries' history that we need to know about.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is not too many resources that are, I think this is a good, like, telling it through story that a lot of people can understand, and it's not more of a kind of you're going to school and need to do a report. The one that we do have is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that Canada had conducted, I believe, in 2014, that documented a lot of what has happened within the Truth and Reconciliation, that they had informed all Canadians that there was a lot of deaths within residential schools, and had said that there was up to 10,000 Indigenous students who died in residential schools. And now that was about 6 years ago, and now it's finally coming to light. And I think people are actually they didn't believe it before, until these graves started to pop out all over Canada and the stories became real to them. And that's kind of what, for me, what I want to have a message to Canadians is, you didn't believe us then. Now look at these different stories that we're telling you that your government is doing right now. You can believe us now.
Through the Empowered Filmmaker program, which I've actually taught some people from Gitnyao how to produce their own films, and I've been running this film program for Indigenous communities for 5 years. There's been so many stories that have come out that have never been heard before about residential schools. So if you guys wanted to check that out, you can too, on our website too. And that's just like first time Indigenous filmmakers interviewing people from their communities and then finally revealing these. A lot of them had kept these stories inside, and it's good to put them out there. So it's one of the reasons I actually teach filmmaking, is to make sure that these voices are heard and the truth can be heard about these issues.
But if there is, you guys do have a website, I can find more information, and also email that to whoever the contact is for this group.
Yeah, thank you. If you share those links with me, I will put them in the comments box underneath this video once it's posted, so people can learn more and also see the films that you mentioned, Farhan. That sounds fantastic. And anyone who hasn't seen this film, please check it out. We have it as part of our online virtual version of the Freeland Film Festival. You can go to the freeland.org website to figure out how to get your pass to watch it online. And I think, Farhan, you also have it on your site. So anybody who wants to watch the film, please watch it. It's called Hani Tok, if I'm pronouncing that right. Our food table, and it's a really important film. So please do watch it. Steve?
Yeah, just one more thing. I know we're running over a couple of minutes, but good conversation. And I'm glad, Farhan, you plugged your website because you are doing great work on that. But also, maybe one other resource is the YouTube site for Freeland Film Festival. As Farhan knows, every year we've hosted not just films, but panels on this subject. It's been very interesting to meet Joel and listen to him. We've also had Native American representatives, mainly from Wisconsin, where we've held our film festival the other years, speak to similar issues. And those panels have been maintained on the Freeland Film Festival section of the Freeland YouTube. But I also just want to say, after listening to Joel here, one thing I am always amazed at is, in spite of all the broken promises and some of these ongoing challenges, I'm just always amazed at how peaceful the response is. And that's a compliment, but it's also just something that I'm just amazed at. And I do hope that we, Freeland, can help get this word out more, because, you know, after people know about this and see these films, it does make one, well, at least me, outraged. But I'm also very respectful of the fact that you're seeking peaceful ways, and alliances, etc. So I think that'll probably get even more support. So thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, and it sounds like you're really making progress, which is really hopeful and a really positive thing. So keep up the amazing work. You guys are really making change with what you're both doing, and I hope everybody can continue to follow what they're doing and hopefully support it from where you are and keep learning more. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for being here. It's just an honor to have you both here sharing with us today.
Thanks, guys, and thank you, Joel, for having me.
Yeah, thank you all, and good pronunciation, Molly.
I tried. Thank you so much. Take care, you guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. What's next? You have to come up and share that with us. Oh, is it? We have Keystone and
Okay, so for those watching on Facebook Live, you still have the option of watching these. You can get your virtual pass through freeland.org. Freeland.org, it's all there, the program and the button you push to buy it. But in any case, the next set of films we're going to these are medium length and short films. One is called Keystone, and the other one is called Inga the Wonder Tree. These will run for about 45 minutes collectively, and after that we're going to have a very relevant panel called, it's a discussion about industrial versus regenerative agriculture. Which one can better feed a hungry planet? I'll be hosting that with some other speakers coming in from different parts of the world. That'll be at about 2:15, so let's roll the movie. Thank you.